Hi, welcome to Northern Clay Center's online teaching series. My name is Priya Thoresen, and I'm going to share with you my playlist for the topic of art, craft, and design. I've been using this for my classes that are with university students, which are now online, and also with a PSEO college in the schools class. So I feel like this is good for online instruction, but it can also be used as in-class things, especially if you just need like a filler activity or some real life examples to give students some prompts for how they might think about artwork a little more. So starting with my first slide here. So this is just for because I'm doing online, but it would also be good to have in person, I suppose. So it starts out just saying, welcome to the classroom. Today we're going to start by watching the video, what's the difference between art and craft. So this video, you can get it on YouTube, and it traces the history of art and craft a little bit, and through the Renaissance and how painting and sculpture at that point in time became considered like the premier art form, while things that were more done with a workshop mentality of a group of people were relegated to be called craft. And that's really a mindset which has continued throughout the Western world till today. I don't have a specific video on design. So at this point, I talk to students a little bit about how I think of design as something that is maybe a little more recent and more modern in style, and is often made in collaboration with industry. So if we think about IKEA, that's maybe designed by an individual designer, but then they outsource the work to a factory. And a lot of design things that you think of, they're also meant to solve a problem. So if you go to IKEA, you'll find all sorts of design things that are maybe going to help you live in a small space or organize your kitchen better. So after watching the video, I think it would be helpful to ask students to come up with a list or brainstorm a little bit or do a Venn diagram or anything to help them think again about how you might categorize art, craft, and design. The video talks about calling everything visual culture, which I think is a really good kind of phrase to encompass everything, but it can also be useful to think about how we might categorize different aspects of an artwork or a design object or a craft object. And of course, there's a lot of overlap between these things, which is something that you might talk about what these things have in common, as well as what their differences could be. So with my class, when I did it online, I introduced the topic to them, and then I gave the option of choosing one of the following videos to watch and learn a little bit more about, and then respond to it in a 250 to 300 word discussion board post. You could use this in a lot of ways, whether you're doing the same thing or whether you're just showing the whole class different videos on different days, or if you're just picking a few and choosing a few. So my first one here that I have is by the artist Virgil Ortiz. He is an indigenous artist from New Mexico, and he makes a lot of work about his family's history and his cultural history. And he also has a new take in some ways on historical work. Next artist here is Akio Takamori. So Akio Takamori has a video segment from Craft in America, which has a whole TV series on YouTube that you can watch for free. And so this one, he talks about his training in Japan and how he came to the United States for art school and how those things differ. The video itself doesn't have a whole lot of visual imagery, so I would include some more pictures of his work to give to students along with that. Next one I have is Peace and Unity, Pottery in Ghana. So this is a good example of global art and how pottery is in a lot of ways the same all over the world with the kind of processes that we use. So this is a small business of making pots. So there are the people that started it, and then they have a few employees. So I think that this is just like an interesting global perspective. Next, we have Betty Woodman. Betty Woodman, her work looks a lot like pottery. It looks like a lot like sculpture. And she also talks a lot about painting in relation to her artwork. I have a video here called Thinking Out Loud. This video has a lot of good content, but it is older. So if you look at it, it just like doesn't really have the pop and pizzazz of a lot of more recent video work. So that might be a little bit of a tougher sell, but it's good content in there. So another vessel maker that I tend to think of who belongs a little more in the sculptural realm is Nicole Cherubini. So this one also, it might be a little bit of a tougher sell. I watch it and I'm like, that's awesome. But she uses a lot of like art speak that maybe will go over the heads of your students if they haven't ever listened to an artist talk before. But I think it's good. Maybe prep them a little bit before you dive into this one. Next, we have Heath Ceramics. So Heath Ceramics was founded in California in 1948. We don't have a huge history of industrial ceramics in the United States. If you pick up a bowl or a plate that's industrial produced, it's probably going to have somewhere in Europe or Asia as its place of origin. So Heath Ceramics is one of our ceramic industries here, and they have a factory in Sausalito, California, which you can go to for tours. And the YouTube link here is actually an interview with one of their designers. Next, we have Brian Granuski. So he makes what he calls drippy pots. And so his work feels really contemporary. It is all handmade by him. He has an MFA from Cranbrook, which is like a very, very conceptual art school. But I feel like looking at his work, it feels like really different from that. So I think that's an interesting kind of contrast of how somebody might be trained and the kind of like more fun and like commercial aspect of what he came up with afterwards. So those are my options of artists that you might think of how they fit into categories of art, craft, or design. And building on that, I have these as my discussion topics. So I asked students to write a post and respond to 2 of their peers. A lot of what I got was more of a summary and less interpretation of thinking about the work. But for beginning level, if you've never asked students to write about art or talk about art before, I think that's still a good starting point. So you can think, who did you watch or listen to? How would you describe their work? At first impression, how would you categorize it? How did this person get started working in clay? What kind of education do they have? How do they think about history in relation to their work? How are they building on or innovating within an artistic tradition? Do they work alone on all steps of the process, or do other people participate in the making of the work? Do you see the finished work as having more of an individual or collective voice? How do they sell or exhibit their artwork or design objects? And who is their audience? How do you think the cultural or monetary value of an object changes depending on how it is categorized? And what did you find interesting or surprising about the work? So not all of the people that I've talked about have answers to all of these questions. So like not everybody talks about their education. So obviously you can't expect everybody to respond to that question in the same way. And if you're looking for ways that you can build on this lesson, there are obviously a whole ton of things that you could do, but these are just some of my thoughts that I had. So you could ask students to pick a category of art, craft, or design, make a vessel that they think fits in that chosen category. And if you're choosing design, think of it more as a prototype or an original that you would have produced somewhere else. You could reinterpret a historic vessel to tell a contemporary story or narrative. So that would really link to Virgil Ortiz. You combine slabs and cylinder forms like Betty Woodman and think of using the vessel as a canvas for painting. It's often hard to think round when you're painting on a surface, but hers is really flat, which I think makes it like a little less of a design challenge in some ways. And then you can read What Makes a Potter, article by Janet Koplos. Janet Koplos was the editor of Art in America for about 18 years. And so she's one of the relatively few people out there that writes both about contemporary art and ceramics and functional pots. Studio Potter also has a lot of other good resources. Some of it you have to pay a subscription for, but they also have some free articles online too, including this one. And you could learn about arts and industry at the Kohler Factory. Kohler Porcelain Factory makes toilets and sinks. They are located in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, and they have a program where they invite artists to come in and use their materials and make work. It is super cool. I will have these linked, or Northern Clay Center will have these articles linked on their website, so be sure to check that out. Thank you for listening.